The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Bucharest smelled like burnt coffee and testosterone, the usual Monday morning cocktail that made me nostalgic for literally anywhere else. Colonel Eliana Stevenson stood at the front, her uniform pressed sharp enough to cut glass, clicking through satellite images on the wall display. 12 Romanian nationals missing from villages across the Făgăraș region. Her British accent sliced through the room's recycled air. Local authorities are pushing the Russian infiltration angle, but NATO wants independent verification. Political theater. The Russians hadn't operated this far west in years. But sure, let's blame the convenient boogeyman. I kept my face neutral while Zoe caught my eye from across the table, her eyebrow doing that skeptical arch thing that said she wasn't buying it either. Your objective is reconnaissance only. Stevenson's green eyes swept our 4-woman squad. Document, assess, report. No engagement unless directly fired upon. The satellite image switched to an aerial view of Kartsa village, tucked into the Carpathian Mountains like a secret someone forgot to keep. One road in, same road out. The kind of place where everyone knows your grandmother's maiden name and what you had for breakfast. Population 342 as of last census, Stevenson continued. Complete communication blackout for 3 weeks now. No cell signals, no internet, no landlines. Her hands trembled. Just barely. A tiny shake as she clicked to the next slide. But after 2 years of reading people's tells in combat zones, I noticed. Whatever had her spooked, it wasn't Russians. Catherine leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. Ma'am, what about the Romanian military? They must have sent someone. 2 reconnaissance teams, neither reported back. The room went quiet. Even Zoe stopped fidgeting with her pen. Weather's been clear, Stevenson added, as if weather explained trained soldiers vanishing. You deploy at 0600 tomorrow. Questions? Nobody had questions. We had concerns, doubts, and that special kind of dread that comes with missions, where the briefing raises more questions than it answers. But no questions. Outside the briefing room, we gathered around the equipment lockers like kids comparing lunch money. Zoe pulled out her rifle, checking the scope. So we're really doing this? Rolling into Dracula country to find some missing villagers? It's not Dracula country, Catherine muttered, loading technical equipment into her pack. That's Wallachia, not... Same difference. Transylvania, vampires, mysterious disappearances. Zoe grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe I should pack some garlic. Dolly pulled out her rifle in silence, running through her checks with mechanical precision. When she thought we weren't watching, she crossed herself, a quick practiced motion that made me wonder what she knew that we didn't. Just another recon mission, I said, trying to inject confidence I didn't feel. We go in, we document, we leave. Simple. Nobody responded. We all knew simple missions didn't require special forces. The helicopter lifted off at exactly 6 a.m., carrying us over Romania's increasingly empty landscape. Cities gave way to towns, towns to villages, villages to nothing but forest and mountain. The pilot, a weathered Romanian who looked like he'd been flying since helicopters were invented, kept glancing at his instruments. Magnetic interference, he announced about 40 minutes in. Getting worse the closer we get. Is that normal? I asked. He laughed, not a comfortable sound. Nothing about this region is normal. I'll have to set you down early. We touched down in a frost-covered clearing 2 kilometers from the village. The rotors wound down, and silence rushed in to fill the space, the kind of complete quiet that makes you realize how much noise the world usually makes. No birds, no insects, not even wind through the trees. Catherine pulled out her motion sensor as we formed up. The screen stayed blank. Equipment malfunction? Zoe asked. No, it's working. Catherine tapped the display. There's just... nothing. No movement signatures at all. The forest path to Kartsa was barely wide enough for our single-file formation. Our boots crunched on frozen leaves, the sound obscenely loud in the stillness. Every few meters, I caught myself checking over my shoulder, certain something was watching. But Catherine's sensor stayed empty, and the forest stayed dead. We smelled the village before we saw it. That particular mixture of wood smoke and livestock that should have meant civilization. Except the smoke was old, stale, and there were no animal sounds. The trees thinned, revealing the main road into Kurza. 3 cars blocked the entrance, parked at odd angles like their drivers had stopped in a hurry. Doors hung open. A child's toy, a stuffed rabbit, lay in the mud beside one vehicle. I approached the nearest car, a battered Dacia with Romanian plates, keys still in the ignition, engine cold enough to hurt when I touched it. "Been here a while," Catherine confirmed, checking another vehicle. "Battery's dead. Fuel gauge shows half a tank." Zoe peered through the rear window of a small van. Groceries in the back, milk, bread, all spoiled. They'd been leaving, or trying to, but something had made them abandon their vehicles right here, at the very edge of the village. "Tactical formation," I ordered, though my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Weapons ready. We proceed as trained." We moved past the abandoned cars into Kurza proper. The main street stretched ahead, lined with modest houses that should have shown signs of life. Laundry on lines, smoke from chimneys, faces in windows. Instead, we got closed doors, dark windows, and that oppressive silence that made my teeth ache. The Orthodox church sat at the village center, its door hanging open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. Beyond it, more houses, a small school, what looked like a general store. All empty, all wrong. "Where is everyone?" Dolly whispered, the first word she'd spoken since we'd left base. I didn't have an answer, but looking at my squad's faces, Zoe's forced bravado cracking, Catherine's fingers white-knuckled on her equipment, Dolly clutching her rifle like a lifeline, I knew we all felt it. Whatever had happened here wasn't finished. It was waiting. The first house stood 3 meters from the church, its blue door cracked open just enough to make my neck prickle. I held up my fist, halt, then pointed at Catherine and the entrance. She nodded, rifle ready, and we moved. Catherine went in low while I swept high. The hallway smelled like spoiled milk and something else, that sweet, sick scent of food left too long. A coat rack by the door held 3 jackets, shoes lined up underneath. Normal stuff, except for the dust already settling on everything. "Clear," Catherine called from the kitchen. I found her staring at the table. 3 plates set for breakfast. Black mold claiming what used to be bread, eggs turned green and sunken, coffee cups still half full with scum floating on top. A fork rested on one plate, food still speared on its tines. They just left. Catherine touched the television in the corner. Static hissed from its screen, the old CRT model inexplicably warm to the touch despite weeks of abandonment. Why leave the TV on? A calendar hung beside the refrigerator. 3 weeks back, someone had circled a date in red marker, the 15th. Beside it, written in the same red, doctor appointment, 10 a.m. Normal life, interrupted. We cleared 6 more houses in the next hour. Same story in each one. Meals abandoned, televisions running, lives paused mid-moment. In one house, a bathtub had overflowed weeks ago, water damage spreading across the ceiling below. Another had a sewing machine still threaded, fabric pinned in place, waiting for someone to finish the hem. The schoolhouse squatted at the street's end, its windows dark. Inside, tiny chairs surrounded low tables, coloring books open to half-finished pages. The smell hit harder here, spoiled lunch milk from the cafeteria mixing with that particular scent of crayons and construction paper. Children's artwork covered every wall, the papers curling at the edges, colors faded from weeks of abandonment. Typical kid stuff mostly. Houses with smoke curling from chimneys, families holding hands, dogs with too many legs. But in the back corner, separated from the others, I found different pictures. These showed stick figures with their arms raised, looking up at red circles in black skies. One child had drawn the circles with eyes inside them. My radio crackled. "Boss, you need to see this." Zoe's voice, steady but tight. The village store sat across from the school. Zoe stood behind the counter, the cash register drawer hanging open. Bills still filled the slots. Romanian lay in neat stacks. Coins scattered across the counter where someone had been making change. Nobody robbed it. She picked up an apple from a display, its skin wrinkled and brown. Produce rotting, dairy expired, but all the money's here. Even found a wallet on the floor with credit cards. Anything else? Yeah. She led me to the back office. Check this out. A delivery schedule hung on the wall. Shipments marked as received right up until 3 weeks ago. Then nothing. But beside it, someone had taped up a piece of paper with handwritten notes. Petru saw lights again. 3rd night. Maria's chickens won't lay. Dogs howling at nothing. The kind of observations rural people make when something's wrong, but they don't have words for it. Command post, I decided. We set up at the inn, central location, multiple exits. The inn occupied the village's heart, a 2-story building with that communist-era concrete construction meant to last forever. Its common room could hold 30 people, though dust motes dancing in the afternoon light were its only occupants now. Tables still held empty glasses, a chess game frozen mid-match. Dolly unpacked our radio equipment on the bar, fingers moving with practiced efficiency. The static that emerged from every frequency wasn't normal interference. It had a rhythm to it, almost like breathing. "Atmospherics are all wrong," she said quietly. "This isn't natural." While she worked the radio, I found the front desk. The guest registry lay open, fountain pen still beside it. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago, signed in shaky handwriting. "Strange lights again last night. The animals know something." I flipped back through previous pages. 2 months ago, everything looked normal. Guests from Bucharest, a German hiking group, locals booking the dining room for a birthday. Then the mentions started. "Beautiful aurora last night" turned into "lights kept me awake" became "why won't they stop?" Sophia. Catherine stood in the doorway to a back office. Found something. The innkeeper's space was organized chaos. Invoices, family photos, a half-eaten sandwich fossilized on a plate. An old wooden desk dominated the room, its drawers locked. I forced the bottom one with my knife, wood splintering. Inside lay a leather journal, worn smooth from handling. I opened it, recognizing the same handwriting from the guest registry but steadier, more deliberate. The first entry was dated 2 months back. Aurora Borealis appeared last night, even though the weather service said impossible at this latitude. Beautiful but wrong somehow. The dogs wouldn't stop barking. I flipped forward. The handwriting grew messier. Lights came 3 nights in a row. Petru claims he lost 4 hours. Went to check his sheep at midnight. Next thing he knew, it was dawn and he was standing in his kitchen. His wife found him there, still in his boots and coat. Another entry. Maria Dalka says she woke up in the churchyard. No memory of walking there. Father Constantine found her at dawn, kneeling in front of a grave that's been sealed for 50 years. She had dirt under her fingernails. The entries grew more frantic. We're all having the same dreams now. 3 heads on one body, too many arms, eyes where there shouldn't be eyes. The children draw them constantly. Little Anna won't stop crying, says the shadow people are coming for harvest. Catherine read over my shoulder. "Mass hysteria?" "Keep reading," I said, though my hands had started shaking. The animals left first. Every dog, cat, even the rats, gone overnight. Then the birds. Now it's so quiet we can hear our own blood moving. Father Constantine says it's demons, but demons don't leave geometric patterns burned into wheat fields. I found them this morning, perfect triangles and circles, the grain fused into glass. The final entries were barely legible, written in apparent panic. They're not lights, they're eyes. God help us. They see everything. They know we're here. They've always known. The children disappeared during morning prayers, 37 of them, gone between one hymn and the next. Most parents claim they never had children, but some of us remember. The forgetting spreads like sickness. I write their names here so someone will know. Anna, Mikhail, Elena. The list continued for 2 pages. Movement in the church. Zoe's voice cut through the radio static. Thermal's picking up something. On our way. I closed the journal, then reconsidered and shoved it in my pack. Evidence. Or proof I wasn't losing my mind. Catherine, with me. Zoe, Dolly. Maintain position. The church door hung wider than before. I was certain of it. The hinges hadn't moved, the drag marks in the dirt were the same, but the gap had increased by inches. Catherine checked her equipment. Thermal shows nothing now. But Zoe was right. Something registered for about 3 seconds. We entered together, weapons raised. The nave stretched before us, orthodox icons watching from every wall. Except the faces were wrong. Every saint, every angel, every depiction of Christ. Their eyes had been scratched out. Not violently, carefully, precisely. Recent? I asked. Catherine examined the nearest icon. No dust settled in the scratches, but the edges are oxidized. Maybe 2 weeks, definitely after the evacuation. The altar had been defaced with symbols carved deep into the ancient wood. Not random vandalism, these had purpose, meaning. They hurt to look at directly, like those optical illusions that make your brain itch. I photographed everything, though the camera struggled to focus on the carvings. Sophia. Catherine stood at a side door. Priest's quarters. The small room beyond looked like the cell of someone documenting their own madness. Biblical passages covered every wall, written in what my brain insisted was red paint despite the copper smell. Revelations mostly, the parts about angels that weren't quite angels. But mixed in were other texts, things I didn't recognize, languages that predated Romanian, maybe predated anything European. One passage, written larger than the others, made my skin crawl. And they had faces before and behind, and wings that were eyes, and their voice was the sound of many waters saying, "The harvest comes." Mission report's going to be interesting, I muttered, photographing everything. You think anyone will believe this? I don't believe it, and I'm looking at it. We returned to the inn as darkness approached. Real darkness, not the purple twilight I'd see later. Dolly met us at the door, her face pale. I saw figures in the forest, multiple heat signatures moving in formation. How many? 12, maybe more, but when I used the scope, she shook her head. Nothing there. Thermal shows them clear as day, but visual spectrum's empty. Standard security protocols kicked in. Everyone inside, set watches, 2-hour rotations, overlapping fields of fire. Nobody goes out alone. While the others set up sleeping positions, I noticed Catherine staring at one of the innkeeper's sketches I'd torn from the journal. The drawing showed a crude, 3-headed creature, its body a mass of limbs that didn't follow human anatomy. My grandmother, she said quietly, used to tell stories about things that came from the sky. Said they took entire villages in Mexico generations ago. Left nothing but empty buildings and burn marks in patterns. Folklore, I said automatically. Yeah. She set the sketch down. Folklore. But we both compared it to the children's drawings from the school. The similarities were undeniable. The 3 heads, the impossible limbs, the eyes in wrong places. At 2200 hours, I tried to radio base for our scheduled check-in. Instead of Colonel Stevenson's voice, I got static with that same rhythmic quality Dolly had noticed. Like breathing. Like something enormous. Breathing in the dark. Atmospherics, I told the others, seeing my own doubt reflected in their faces. We'll try again at midnight. But I knew we wouldn't reach anyone. Whatever had taken this village wasn't finished. It was listening. I tucked the flashlight between my shoulder and chin, angling it down at the innkeeper's journal while the others swept the inn's perimeter. The handwriting got worse with each entry, neat cursive deteriorating into desperate scratches. Third night of lights. Petru's sheep won't leave the barn. They press against the back wall, bleeding until their throats go raw. Catherine passed behind me, checking window locks. The metallic click of each latch felt too loud in the silence. Father Constantine held special prayers. 40 people came, the whole village practically. But during the service, we all heard it. Singing, coming from above the church. Not hymns. Something else. Mathematical. Like if geometry had a voice. The next page showed sketches. At first glance, they looked like doodles, triangles, circles, interconnected lines. But the longer I stared, the more my eyes watered. The patterns seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging into configurations that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Found these burned into Dalka's wheat field this morning. The grain turned to glass where the lines touched. Perfect angles, impossible angles. The priest says it's demons, but I've never heard of demons leaving geometric patterns burned into wheat fields. More sketches filled the following pages. The innkeeper had drawn the village at the center of converging lines, like a spider web with Kurtza as the trapped fly. Numbers ran along the margins. Coordinates, maybe, or measurements. Some were crossed out and rewritten, as if he'd been trying to solve an equation he didn't understand. The children knew. They've been drawing them for weeks, the things with 3 heads, before they vanished. I kept their drawings, their names written on each one: Anna Petru, Mikhail Dalka, Elena Voicu. Parents thought it was imagination until we compared pictures. Every child drawing the same creature, down to the number of fingers on each hand. 17. Always 17. My hand cramped from holding the journal. Outside, Zoe's boots crunched on gravel as she completed another circuit. Everything felt normal, routine even, except for that suffocating wrongness pressing down on the village. The final entry was barely legible, written in shaking hands. They're not lights. They're eyes. God help us, they see everything. They know we're here. They've always known. The harvest. The sentence ended mid-word, ink trailing off the page like he'd been interrupted, or taken. Boss. Zoe's voice crackled through the radio. Movement in the church. Copy. How many? Can't tell. Thermal's acting up, but something's definitely in there. Catherine looked up from her equipment check. I closed the journal, shoving it into my pack. Catherine, you're with me. Zoe, Dolly. Maintain position at the inn. Roger that. The church door had definitely moved. Earlier, it hung open maybe 18 inches. Now it gaped wide enough for a person to walk through without turning sideways. Our boots echoed on the stone steps, that hollow sound churches make when they're empty. Thermal's showing interference, Catherine whispered, tapping her device. Like heat mirages, but cold. We entered with weapons raised. The nave stretched before us, Orthodox icons watching from every wall. My flashlight beam swept across their faces, and my stomach dropped. Every saint, every angel, every depiction of Christ, their eyes had been scratched out, not violently, carefully, precisely, like someone had taken their time with a sharp tool and steady hands. Recent? I asked. Catherine examined the nearest icon, running her finger along the scratches. No dust in the grooves, but the wood's oxidized. Maybe 2 weeks? The altar made my skin crawl. Someone had carved symbols deep into the ancient wood. the same geometric patterns from the innkeeper's sketches. They seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision, but when I looked directly, they stayed still. My camera struggled to focus on them, the autofocus hunting back and forth like it couldn't find a stable plane. "Document everything," I said, though part of me wanted to run. "Sophia." Catherine stood at a side door. "Priest's quarters." The small room beyond looked like a crime scene or a madman's cell. Biblical passages covered every wall, written in what my brain insisted was red paint, despite the copper smell that said otherwise. Revelations mostly. The weird parts about angels that weren't quite angels. About things with many eyes and wings that spoke like thunder. But mixed in were other texts, languages I didn't recognize. Some looked pre-Roman, others completely alien. Mathematical formulas that hurt to follow. Star charts showing constellations that didn't exist. One passage, written larger than the others across the ceiling, made me step back. And they had faces before and behind, and wings that were eyes, and their voice was the sound of many waters saying, "The harvest comes, the harvest comes, the harvest comes." "Mission report's going to be interesting," I muttered, photographing everything even though the images came out blurry. "You think anyone will believe this?" "I don't believe it, and I'm looking at it." Catherine found more behind the door. Pages torn from different books, pinned to the wall with rusted nails. Some showed anatomical drawings of things that weren't human, but had human parts. Others displayed mathematical proofs that seemed to demonstrate the impossibility of their own existence. We documented everything, then headed back to the inn. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the half hour we'd been gone, our breath forming clouds in the dark. Dolly met us at the door, her face pale, eyes wide. I saw figures in the forest. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands shook. Multiple heat signatures moving in formation. "How many?" 12, maybe more." She led us to her observation post at an upstairs window. "But when I used the scope..." She shook her head, frustrated. "Nothing there. Thermal shows them clear as day, but visual spectrum's empty." Standard security protocols kicked in automatically. Everyone inside. Set watches. 2-hour rotations. Overlapping fields of fire. Nobody goes out alone. While the others set sleeping positions, I spread our findings across the inn's bar. Catherine picked up one of the innkeeper's sketches, the 3-headed creature with too many limbs drawn in shaking hands. "My grandmother," she said quietly, not looking at me, "used to tell stories about things that came from the sky. Said they took entire villages in Mexico generations ago, left nothing but empty buildings and burn marks in patterns." "Folklore," I said, but the word felt hollow. "Yeah." She set the sketch down next to a photo from the school. "Folklore." The children's drawings matched the innkeeper's sketch too closely for comfort. Same 3 heads on serpentine necks, same impossible number of limbs, same eyes in places eyes shouldn't exist. Different hands, different ages, different artistic abilities. But the same creature. "Could be mass hysteria," Catherine offered without conviction. "Shared delusions. Across decades, the priest's writings reference things from before the village was founded." We both stared at the evidence spread before us. Military training said to trust only what you could verify, but everything here defied verification while being undeniably real. At 2200 hours, I tried reaching base for our scheduled check-in. Static filled the channel, but not normal interference. This static had rhythm, like breathing through a ventilator, or something enormous breathing in the dark. "Atmospherics," I told the others, seeing my own doubt reflected in their faces. "We'll try again at midnight." Zoe took first watch at the window while the rest of us tried to rest. I lay on a dusty couch, listening to the building settle, the ancient wood creaking in patterns that almost sounded like footsteps. Through the window, stars that seemed too bright, too close, looked back. The radio static continued its rhythmic pulse, in and out, like breathing, like something vast and patient, waiting just beyond the edge of perception. The scream ripped through my sleep like a knife through paper. I rolled off the couch, rifle in hand, before my brain caught up with being awake. Dolly stood at the window, her mouth open in a silent second scream, finger pointing at something outside. Red light flooded the inn, again. The same impossible red from the innkeeper's journal, not fire or flares or anything that made sense. This light moved through the walls like they weren't there, casting shadows that bent the wrong direction. It pulsed with a rhythm that made my teeth ache, just as he'd described. "Everyone gear up." I grabbed my vest, fingers fumbling with buckles. "Full kit now." Catherine was already moving, but her night vision goggles sparked and died the moment she switched them on. The radio on Dolly's pack shrieked, a high-pitched whine that drilled into my skull. I checked my watch. The hands had stopped at 9:17, though the second hand twitched back and forth like it was fighting against something. The light grew stronger, turning the inn's common room the color of fresh blood. Through the window, I could see it came from directly above the village square, the same place the innkeeper had described, though looking up there hurt like staring at the sun through red glass. "It's happening, just like the journal." Catherine's words died as Zoe walked past the window. She moved wrong, not running toward a threat or taking cover like we'd drilled 1,000 times. She walked slow and steady into the courtyard, arms hanging loose at her sides, face tilted up toward that impossible light. "Zoe, get back inside." I yanked the door open, the metal handle burning cold under my palm. "That's an order." She didn't even twitch, just stood there in the middle of the courtyard, the red light making her skin look like it was made of rubies. Her eyes, God, her eyes reflected the light like mirrors, throwing it back in ways that made my vision swim. I ran outside, the air thick and electric, tasting like copper pennies and ozone. Grabbed Zoe's shoulder, tried to shake her. Nothing. Her body was rigid, every muscle locked. I pulled harder, putting my weight into it, but she didn't budge, like her boots had fused with the cobblestones. "Zoe, snap out of it." Behind me, footsteps on gravel. Catherine walked past me, that same mechanical stride, that same upward stare. The light caught her immediately, her body going statue still 3 feet from Zoe. "Catherine, no." I lunged for her, but touching her was like grabbing stone. Her skin felt wrong, too cold, too hard, vibrating with a frequency I felt in my bones. The pulsing accelerated. The light didn't just illuminate anymore. It penetrated, passing through their bodies like X-rays. I could see through Zoe, actually see through her to the ground beneath. Her edges blurred, skin going translucent, bones visible as dark shadows inside fading flesh. Jesus Christ. I stumbled backward. Zoe? Catherine? Fight it. They were dissolving. No other word for it. Their bodies grew more transparent with each pulse, like someone was erasing them one layer at a time. Zoe's rifle clattered through her vanishing hands, hitting the ground with a sound that seemed to come from miles away. Movement at the inn door. Dolly stood silhouetted against the interior darkness, 1 foot raised to step outside. The journal had been clear. Don't let them walk into the light. I moved on pure training and desperate memory. Hit her with a full-body tackle that sent us both crashing back into the inn. She gasped. The spell, or whatever the hell it was, breaking as we hit the floor. "Stay inside." I kicked the door shut, though the red light passed through wood like it wasn't there. "The cellar. Move." Through the window, I watched the last of Catherine disappear. Her equipment fell through empty air, vest, helmet, rifle hitting the cobblestones in a sequence that sounded like a countdown. Then nothing. Not even dust where she'd stood. Zoe lasted 3 more seconds. Her face was the last thing to go, mouth open in what might have been a scream or a prayer. Those mirror eyes reflecting red until they weren't there to reflect anything. No, no, no. I pressed against the glass, searching for any trace of them. Their gear lay scattered on the ground, but my soldiers, my friends, were gone. My chest caved in on itself, lungs forgetting how to work. Catherine, Zoe, the family I'd chosen, the only people who understood what we'd been through together. Gone, dissolved like they'd never existed. My fist slammed into the window frame, pain shooting up my arm. Good, real, something that made sense when nothing else did. Dolly grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the cellar stairs. I couldn't move. Couldn't think past the image of Zoe's face dissolving, Catherine's body going transparent. My squad, my responsibility. Failed them. Failed. Sophia. Dolly's voice cut through the spiral, her grip bruising on my arm. Right. Still had one left, one soldier to protect. The training kicked in, shoving grief into a box I'd open later. If there was a later. Smart girl. Always the smart one when panic hit. We stumbled down into darkness that the red light hadn't reached yet, though I could feel it pressing down through the floorboards above. The cellar smelled like centuries of dust and stone. One small window near the ceiling let in a shaft of that awful light, painting a red square on the opposite wall. We pressed ourselves into the corner farthest from it, Dolly clutching her rifle like a talisman. "What's happening?" Her voice came out steady, but I felt her shaking against my shoulder. "Where did they go?" "I don't know." The pulsing above grew stronger, faster, like a heartbeat approaching climax. Even down here, the light found ways in. Through cracks in the floorboards, around the door frame, through that damned window. It built and built until closing my eyes did nothing. Red blazed through my eyelids, through my hands when I covered them. Through everything. The cellar window exploded inward, not from impact. The glass just ceased to exist, leaving a perfect rectangular hole. The light poured through like liquid, flooding across the floor toward us. Dolly's hand tightened on mine. "Our Father, who art in heaven." The light hit us, and suddenly she weighed nothing. I felt her being pulled away, not by hands, but by something that grabbed at the space she occupied. I held on, muscles screaming, but it was like trying to hold water. "Sophia." Her voice stretched, distorting. "Please." Her fingers slipped through mine. Not past them, through them, like she was becoming something I couldn't touch. I grabbed for her again, but caught only air. The red light flared, and Dolly vanished mid-prayer, her voice cutting off between "hallowed be" and "thy name." The light exploded, going from red to white to nothing. Every nerve in my body fired at once. I tasted metal, smelled burning ozone, felt my bones trying to crawl out of my skin. Then darkness rushed in, and I fell toward it, grateful for the nothing that swallowed me whole. The cellar floor pressed cold against my cheek, gritty with dust that tasted like rust when I breathed. My head felt stuffed with cotton, thoughts swimming through molasses. Dolly was gone. I'd watched her dissolve through my fingers, felt her become something I couldn't hold. The memory hit like a physical blow, her hand slipping through mine, her scream cutting off mid-breath. She was gone. Nothing. Just my own breathing and a weird humming in my ears, like standing too close to power lines. I pushed myself up, muscles screaming in protest. The cellar looked wrong. Morning light spilled through the window, that same window the red light had poured through, but the color was off. Purple tinted, like looking through colored glass, except there was no glass anymore. Just an empty frame. My watch had stopped at 3:17, the second hand frozen mid-tick. Radio dead. Night vision fried. Even my flashlight wouldn't turn on, though I could hear the batteries rattling inside when I shook it. Only my grandfather's compass still worked, the needle spinning like it was trying to find north in a world that didn't have one anymore. The wooden stairs groaned under my boots, each step releasing clouds of dust that shouldn't exist. We'd been here hours ago. Maybe. Time felt slippery, hard to pin down. But this dust spoke of years, decades even. The inn's common room stopped me cold. Everything had aged a century overnight. The bar where we'd spread our maps was now a skeleton of rotted wood, bottles on the shelves green with mold that pulsed faintly in the purple light. Wallpaper hung in strips like dead skin, revealing walls beneath that looked organic, veined and moist. The couch where I'd tried to sleep had collapsed into itself, springs poking through fabric that disintegrated when I touched it. Our gear was gone. Every trace of my squad vanished. Even the dust patterns on the floor showed no footprints but mine. The front door hung off one hinge. I pushed through, and the impossibility of it all hit like a physical blow. Kurtza had become a corpse. Buildings slumped like they'd been melting for decades. Roofs caved in, walls buckled outward. Black vines, thick as my arm and covered in thorns that gleamed like obsidian, strangled everything, growing through windows, bursting through doorways. They pulsed with their own rhythm, a slow heartbeat that made my skin crawl. Above, the sky was wrong. Deep purple, like a bruise covering the world, with no sun, no clouds, just that sick light that came from everywhere and nowhere. The air felt thick, syrupy, coating my throat with each breath. It tasted like pennies and battery acid. A house across the square had split down the middle, its halves leaning away from each other like a broken wishbone. Through the gap, I glimpsed an interior that defied physics, rooms stacked vertically, furniture on the walls, a staircase that spiraled into nothing. My boots crunched on what I thought was gravel, but turned out to be tiny bones, thousands of them, from creatures I couldn't identify. They formed patterns in the street, deliberate arrangements that hurt to look at directly. The church pulled me forward, though every instinct screamed to run. Its stone walls had partially liquefied, flowing down like candle wax before freezing mid-drip. The bell tower twisted into a spiral that shouldn't be able to support its own weight, yet there it stood, defying everything I knew about physics. Inside was worse. The icons we'd photographed, those carefully scratched-out eyes, had changed. The saints now had multiple faces, each one screaming. Their halos had become geometric patterns that shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them. Christ on the cross had grown extra arms, each hand pointing in different directions, toward exits that didn't exist in normal space. The altar had sprouted. That's the only word for it. Black branches grew from the carved symbols, reaching toward the melted ceiling, dripping something that hissed when it hit the floor. A sound from outside made me freeze. Heavy footsteps, but wrong. Too many legs, an uneven rhythm like something learning to walk. Then breathing, wet and labored, like lungs full of fluid. I crept to a window, peering through warped glass that made everything look like a funhouse mirror. What I saw made my brain refuse to process it for several seconds. The thing stood 3 meters tall, maybe more. Hard to tell when its proportions kept shifting. 3 heads on necks that moved like snakes, weaving independently, each face almost human, but stretched wrong. Its body was... God, how do I even describe it? Flesh and exposed bone twisted together, ribs on the outside forming a cage around organs that glowed faintly purple. Arms sprouted from its torso at angles that made me nauseous, each one ending in hands with too many fingers, or fingers with too many joints. It moved through the square with purpose, those 3 heads scanning in different directions. Behind it came others. Some walked on 2 legs but had their torsos reversed, faces where their backs should be. One crawled on dozens of human hands, its body just a mass of writhing flesh. Another looked almost normal until it turned and I saw its skin was covered in human eyes, hundreds of them, all blinking in perfect synchronization. They were searching. Their movements had patterns, systematic, thorough. The three-headed one would gesture with one of its many arms, and the others would spread out, checking buildings, peering through windows. I pressed myself against the wall, not daring to breathe. One of the eye-covered things passed right by my window. This close, I could see the eyes were different colors: blue, brown, green, gray, and they all turned toward me for just a moment before moving on. Each iris contracted in sequence like a wave of recognition that didn't quite complete. Hours passed, or minutes, or days. Time had no meaning in this purple hell. The creatures continued their search pattern, occasionally making sounds to each other. Not words, but mathematical tones, like if equations could speak. Finally, they moved toward the forest, disappearing between trees that now grew in impossible directions, some sideways, some upside down, roots and branches indistinguishable. I waited until my legs cramped, until the purple light shifted to something darker, though no night fell. Then I crept from the church back to the inn, moving between shadows that fell the wrong direction. In the inn's kitchen, I found canned goods in a pantry that had somehow survived the decay. The labels were in languages that shifted when I looked at them, Romanian to Russian to something that used symbols instead of letters. The food inside tasted like copper and ash, but my stomach accepted it. Water ran from the taps, thick and oily, burning my throat going down. But I drank it anyway, survival instinct overriding disgust. I barricaded myself in the cellar again, using furniture that crumbled at my touch but still provided some barrier. Through the empty window frame, that purple light pulsed with its own rhythm, and sometimes I heard the creatures calling to each other in their equation speak. My squad was gone. The village was gone. The world itself seemed gone, replaced by this nightmare where physics went to die. But I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was alive in this wrong place, breathing wrong air under a wrong sky. And somewhere out there, those things were still searching. For what, I didn't know. But I had the sick feeling it might be me. The purple light never changed, which made tracking time impossible. I marked days in the innkeeper's journal with tally marks, but even those felt like lies. My body said I'd been here over 2 weeks. The stubble on my legs, the weight I'd lost, the way my uniform hung loose, all of it suggested time passing. But the light stayed constant, that bruised sky neither brightening nor dimming. I'd turned the inn cellar into something resembling a base. Furniture from upstairs barricaded the entrance, though the rotting wood wouldn't stop those things if they really wanted in. The canned goods I'd found in the pantry lined one wall, labels in languages that shifted when I looked away, contents that tasted like batteries and ash but kept me vertical. Water came from the taps, thick as syrup and burning all the way down. The first time I drank it, I threw up immediately. The second time, I kept it down for an hour. By what I called day 10, my stomach had adapted. Or maybe I was becoming something that could process whatever this was. The creatures moved in patterns. Every 6 hours, I counted Mississippis. The three-headed thing would cross the square from east to west. 2 hours later, the crawler made of hands would circuit the buildings counterclockwise. The thing covered in eyes never followed a pattern I could detect, but it always stayed near the church. I mapped it all in the journal's margins: patrol routes, safe windows, which buildings they entered, which they avoided. The school, for some reason, they never touched. Neither did they approach the forest paths that led out of town. On day 12, I tried to leave. The main road should have led to the clearing where the helicopter dropped us. I walked for 3 hours, purple forest pressing in on both sides, those black vines pulsing with their own heartbeat. The trees grew at angles that hurt to process, some horizontal, some corkscrewed into spirals, some with roots reaching up while branches burrowed down. The road ended at Karza's entrance. The same abandoned cars, the same crumbling buildings. I'd walk straight out, and arrived back where I started. I tried again, this time marking trees with my knife. An hour later, I found my marks, but I was approaching them from the opposite direction I'd carved them. The forest paths were worse. Take the north trail, end up entering from the south, walk backward, somehow arrive at the church, face east while walking west, find yourself at the inn. The geometry wasn't just wrong, it was actively hostile to logic. I filled pages with diagrams, trying to map the impossibility. Certain routes only worked if you didn't look at your destination. Others required walking with your eyes closed for exactly 100 steps. One path would only let you pass if you crawled. By day 15, I'd accepted the truth. The village was a bubble, a pocket of wrong space with no exit that followed rules I could understand. The school basement door had been locked when we first swept the building. Now it hung open, darkness yawning beyond. I'd avoided it for days, some instinct warning me away. But supplies were running low, and I'd searched everywhere else. The stairs descended farther than a basement should go. My flashlight had been dead since the red light fried it, so I navigated by that purple light that seemed to come from the air itself. The walls were wrong, organic, like the inside of something's throat. They pulsed slightly, warm to the touch. The smell hit first, not decay, something else. Like ozone and copper and something sweet sick I couldn't identify. Then I saw her. Dolly. My voice cracked on her name. She was in the wall. Not against it, in it. Her back and left side merged with the organic surface. Her face turned toward me, eyes tracking my movement, but her mouth... God, her mouth had been sealed, lips fused together. But that wasn't the worst part. Arms sprouted from her torso, 7 of them, each one perfect and wrong. They moved independently, fingers grasping at air, making shapes that looked almost like sign language if sign language had too many dimensions. Dolly, Jesus Christ, hold on. I reached for her, trying to find where she ended and the wall began. The moment my fingers touched her skin, the world exploded. Not the school basement, not Kurtza. Everywhere. I saw thousands of villages across infinite earths, each one being harvested. The red light descending, people walking into it, bodies dissolving into something useful. A farm. We were looking at a farm that spanned dimensions. The creatures weren't monsters. They were farmers. And humans. We were the crop. I watched Zoe dissolve again, but this time I saw where she went. Not destroyed, transported, processed, broken down into components I didn't have words for, sorted and stored in facilities that existed outside three-dimensional space. Catherine, too, her consciousness extracted and cataloged, her body repurposed into something else. The visions came faster, Earth after Earth, each one at different stages of harvest. Some still green and blue and ignorant, others already empty, purple skies over dead cities, a few fighting back with weapons that bent reality, but always losing, always harvested in the end. The farmers had been doing this for... The number my brain supplied wasn't a number. It was a concept that meant always and forever, and longer than matter has existed. We weren't special. We weren't unique. We were one crop among infinite fields. The vision released me, and I found myself on my knees, vomiting that thick water onto the basement floor. Dolly's eyes watched me, full of something that might have been pity or warning or both. Her hands moved, all 7 of them, fingers tracing patterns in the dust that had settled on the floor. Letters, slow and careful. BLUELIGHTFORESTESCAPE. I looked at her face, saw tears sliding down cheeks that were partially absorbed into the wall. She was saving me. Somehow, even like this, she was still trying to save me. I can't leave you like this. Her original hands, the 2 that still looked human, made a gesture I recognized from 100 missions. Go. Now. That's an order. I found tins of food in my pack, bottles of that awful water, and arranged them where her hands could reach. Useless, probably. I didn't even know if she could eat anymore. But I had to do something. "I'll come back," I lied. "I'll find help." One of her new hands waved, or maybe warned. The movement was almost cheerful, fingers waggling like she was saying goodbye to a child. Another hand pointed urgently toward the stairs. The creatures were coming. I could hear them above, that wet breathing getting closer. I ran. Up the stairs, through the school, out the back door as the three-headed thing entered the front, into the purple forest where trees grew sideways and up meant down. Blue light, forest, escape. Dolly had given me a mission, the last order from my squad. I was going to follow it, even if it killed me, because staying here, watching the purple light pulse through another endless day, that was killing me anyway. Somewhere in this impossible forest, there was blue light. There was escape. I just had to survive long enough to find it. The forest had become my world. Purple sky above, black vines below, and somewhere between them me, growing weaker with each passing whatever counted as a day here. I'd mapped 17 square kilometers of impossible terrain in my head. The three-headed thing passed through grid reference Alpha 7 at regular intervals, 6 hours by my count. Though without a working watch, I had to estimate using my pulse and counting exercises from training. The hand crawler preferred the eastern slopes where the trees grew upside down. The eye-covered one never strayed more than 200 meters from the church, like it was tethered there. My body was failing. I'd accepted that around day 20 when clumps of hair started coming out in my hands. Brown hair, the color my mother gave me, now littering the purple forest floor. What grew back came in wrong, brittle and pale, already losing its color. I could see it in puddles of that thick water, though the reflection showed 4 of me instead of 1. The fingernails went black on day 25. Not painted, not bruised. Black like they'd been dipped in ink that went down to the bone. I scraped at them with my knife until I bled, but the color went deeper than I could dig. Day 30-something, I found the ravine. It shouldn't have existed. I'd walked this route dozens of times, marking trees, memorizing every twisted trunk. But there it was, a gash in the earth 20 meters across, walls of exposed rock that gleamed like oil in the purple light. The smell hit first. Not decay, older than that. Like opening a tomb that had been sealed before humans learned to write. My watch had started working again after the red light ended, the hands moving normally now, though I didn't trust what they showed. Still, it helped track the intervals. My boots found purchase on the slope, though the rocks felt warm and slightly soft, like skin. Halfway down, I saw them. Skeletons, dozens of them, maybe more, but not scattered or buried. They were part of the rock itself. Bones fused into the stone in perfect spirals, femurs twisted into helixes, rib cages opened like flowers, skulls arranged in a pattern that made my eyes water to follow. One skull had something metallic inside. I worked it free with my knife, the bone crumbling like chalk. A dog tag, green with age but still readable. Morrison, James P., Ray 13507-842, Protestant, O. Pose, U.S. Army, 1968. 1968. This place had been taking people for over 50 years. The tag felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of Morrison's entire unit. How many others had found this purple hell? How many had crawled through these wrong forests looking for escape that never came? I pocketed the tag and kept searching. More bones, older ones, some that didn't look entirely human. Too many ribs. Femurs with joints in the wrong places. A skull with 3 eye sockets arranged in a triangle. The rock itself told a story once I knew how to read it. Layers of harvests, each one leaving its mark. The bones weren't random. They formed a record, a monument to the taken. This wasn't just a trap. It was a processing center that had been operating since before humans had words for what was happening to them. My legs gave out on day 35, not all at once. First, the left knee wouldn't lock properly. Then the right ankle started bending in directions ankles shouldn't bend. I fashioned a crutch from a branch that bled black sap when I cut it. The sap burned my palms but hardened into something like resin, making a decent grip. Day 38, I couldn't walk at all. The bones in my legs felt like they were softening, reshaping themselves into something new. I crawled, dragging myself through purple dirt that tasted like copper when it got in my mouth. My uniform, already threadbare, finally gave up. The fabric just dissolved, leaving me in underwear and boots that somehow still held together. The creatures were getting curious. I'd see them at the edges of my vision, maintaining distance but watching. The three-headed thing would tilt all its heads when it saw me, like a dog trying to understand human speech. Once, the hand crawler approached within 10 meters, its dozens of fingers drumming against the ground in a rhythm that almost sounded like Morse code. They knew I was dying, or changing. Maybe here those were the same thing. Day 40, if my tallies meant anything, I saw it. Just a glimmer at first, so faint I thought my eyes were finally giving up. Blue light, clean and sharp, completely wrong in this purple hell. It came from deeper in the forest, past a grove where the trees grew in perfect mathematical spirals. I crawled toward it. Every meter took forever, my body screaming protests in languages I didn't recognize. The black vines tried to tangle in my path, their thorns tearing skin that didn't bleed red anymore. Something darker, thicker, like the water from the inn's taps. The blue light grew stronger, not steady like the purple sky, but flickering, unstable, like a fluorescent bulb about to die. A clearing opened ahead, and there it was, a crack in the air itself. 3 feet tall, maybe 6 inches wide, edges fuzzing with static electricity. Through it, I could see fragments of normal sky, blue sky, earth sky, clouds that moved the right direction, a sun that actually looked like a sun. Home. Or at least somewhere that wasn't here. I dragged myself faster, fingernails, black fingernails, clawing through dirt. Behind me, branches snapped, that wet breathing sound. They'd found me, all of them converging on my position, 20 meters to the crack. My right leg had gone completely numb, dragging behind me like meat. 15 meters. The three-headed thing burst through the trees to my left, all its mouths opening to reveal teeth arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Triangles and hexagons of human molars. 10 meters. The hand crawler scuttled in from the right, fingers reaching, grasping, some of them wearing wedding rings that caught the blue light. 5 meters. The eye-covered thing stood directly in my path, hundreds of eyes weeping blood that ran upward, defying gravity. I reached for the crack. The three-headed thing moved faster than something that size should. One of its 17-fingered hands caught my ankle, the one that still had feeling. Its grip burned cold, like grabbing dry ice. I kicked with my other leg, the bones bending wrong but connecting with something that might have been its knee. It let go, more surprised than hurt. I threw myself at the crack, fingers finding the edges where reality had torn. The sensation, Jesus, like grabbing a live wire while drowning in ice water while your bones turned to glass. Every atom in my body screamed to let go, but letting go meant staying here, becoming like Dolly, becoming part of the wall. I pulled myself through. The crack was too narrow. My shoulders compressed, bones grinding, skin stretching like taffy. I felt my body trying to exist in 2 dimensions at once, some parts in the purple world, others wherever this led. My vision split, one eye seeing forest, the other seeing sky. Behind me, the three-headed thing reached through the gap. Its arms stretched impossibly long, fingers brushing my back. Where it touched, I felt myself starting to dissolve, cells forgetting how to hold together. But I was mostly through. One final pull, muscles tearing, joints popping out of sockets. The blue light flared, bright enough to burn through my eyelids. The creature's hand was still in the crack when reality snapped back together, severing it at the wrist. The hand fell, twitching, those 17 fingers grasping at nothing. Then the blue consumed everything, and I fell into light that tasted like coming home and dying at the same time. Behind me, through dimensions I could still somehow feel, the three-headed thing stood at the sealed crack. All 6 of its eyes, human eyes I realize now, Zoe's brown and Catherine's hazel, and 4 others I didn't recognize, wept blood that fell upward into the purple sky. The harvest would continue, but not with me, not today. The blue light carried me away from that wrong place, my body stretching across dimensions like paint smeared across canvas. I felt myself coming apart and being put back together, but wrong, always wrong, never quite fitting in the space I was supposed to occupy. Somewhere behind me, the purple world pulsed with its alien heartbeat. Somewhere ahead, Earth waited. If I survived the journey between them. I woke with leather straps biting into my wrists. The Romanian military hospital room smelled like bleach and old cigarettes, a combination that made my empty stomach clench. My throat felt like sandpaper, tongue thick and swollen. How long had I been out? Colonel Stevenson sat beside my bed, uniform perfect as always, but her face looked drawn tight. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes. "You were missing for 72 hours, she said. "We found you unconscious in the village square." 3 days. The words didn't compute. I'd been in that purple hell for weeks, counting every agonizing hour, marking time in the innkeeper's journal that was probably still in my pack somewhere. My legs had failed. My hair had fallen out. I'd crawled through dimensions on broken bones. No. My voice came out cracked, barely recognizable. Longer. Much longer. Stevenson's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. She knew. Somehow she knew I was telling the truth. "The medical team says you're severely dehydrated, malnourished." She glanced at the chart hanging from my bed. "Your blood work shows anomalies, but physically you've only been gone 3 days." I tried to sit up, but the restraints held firm. "Why am I tied down?" "You were combative when they brought you in, kept screaming about red lights and 3-headed creatures." She leaned back in her chair. "The sedatives finally calmed you down." The memories crashed over me. Zoe walking into that light, Catherine dissolving, Dolly in the wall with all those arms. My chest tightened until breathing hurt. "My squad, I'm sorry." Stevenson's voice softened, just for a moment. "We recovered their bodies yesterday." "That's impossible." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "They dissolved. The red light took them apart molecule by molecule. I watched them disappear." Stevenson stood, smoothing her uniform. "The chemical weapons exposure caused severe hallucinations. You're lucky to be alive, Captain Harper." "Chemical weapons?" I pulled against the restraints hard enough to leave marks. There were no chemicals. There was something else. A dimensional shift, the purple world, those things that... "Captain." Her tone cut through my rambling. Professional. Final. "You've been through severe trauma. Your mind is trying to make sense of it." She slid an official report across my bedside table. The paper felt too real, too normal after everything I'd touched in that other place. I scanned the typed words, each one a perfectly crafted lie. Chemical weapons leak from an abandoned Soviet depot. Sarin gas derivatives causing hallucinations and death. 3 KIA. 1 survivor found in critical condition. Bodies recovered and prepared for transport home. "This is bullshit." I looked up at her. "You know this is bullshit." Stevenson's jaw tightened. "What I know is that 3 soldiers are dead and you're alive. The official investigation is complete." "Investigation?" You're just going to... I stopped, seeing the warning in her eyes. Not here. Not now. The room probably had recording devices, observers behind the mirror on the far wall. She leaned down, adjusting my IV bag, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Play along, Captain, for your own sake. Then louder, for whoever was listening. The medical team will continue monitoring you. Intelligence officers will debrief you once you're stable. She left without looking back. The intelligence officers came 6 hours later. 2 men in suits that screamed government contractor, asking the same questions over and over. Tell us about the mission. Describe what you saw. How did you survive when the others didn't? I tried at first. God help me, I tried to tell them the truth. About the village frozen in time. The red light that dissolved my squad. The purple dimension where physics went insane. The 3-headed thing with too many arms. Dolly merged with the wall, spelling out messages with hands that shouldn't exist. They took notes, faces carefully neutral. One of them, Rodriguez, according to his badge, pulled out a tablet. This is satellite footage from 3 days ago. He turned the screen toward me. The village of Kartsa, taken while you were there. Normal streets, normal buildings. Romanian troops walking normal patrols past normal houses. No purple sky, no black vines, no melting church. The timestamp showed it was taken during the time I was crawling through that hellscape on broken legs. That's not possible. The mind creates elaborate scenarios under extreme stress, the other officer Chen said, especially with nerve agent exposure. There was no nerve agent. Rodriguez pulled up another image. 3 body bags being loaded into a medical transport. The photo was clinical, professional, real. Your squad members were found in the church. Cause of death consistent with sarin exposure, respiratory failure, seizures. You were discovered 20 meters away, unconscious but breathing. They dissolved. I watched them. You watched them die from chemical weapons. Chen interrupted. Your mind, trying to protect itself, created an alternate narrative. It's more common than you'd think in survivor cases. I laughed. It came out bitter, broken. So, my hair turning white overnight, that's nerve gas? Extreme stress response. We've seen it before. My fingernails? I held up my hands, showing the black that went down to the bone. Tissue damage from chemical exposure. It should resolve with treatment. They had an answer for everything. Neat, logical explanations that fit into their clean reports. Nothing about dimensions or harvests, or the fact that Earth was just one farm among infinite fields. I want to see the bodies. Rodriguez and Chen exchanged glances. That's not advisable, Chen said. The remains were compromised. Closed casket funerals have been arranged. Of course they were. The questions continued for hours. Each time I mentioned the creatures, the purple world, the impossible geometry, they redirected. Chemical hallucinations, trauma response, survivors' guilt manifesting as elaborate delusions. Finally, Rodriguez leaned back. Captain Harper, I need you to understand something. The story you're telling, if you continue telling it, will result in a psychological discharge. Mandatory psychiatric hold, possibly permanent. Your benefits, your pension, your reputation, all gone. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Chen closed his notebook. Or you can accept that you survived a tragic chemical weapons incident. You'll receive full honors, complete medical care, and return to civilian life as a decorated veteran. The choice hung in the air between us. Keep insisting on the truth and lose everything, or accept their lie and walk away. I need time to think. They left me alone with the official report. I read it again, memorizing the details of the lie I was supposed to believe. Soviet depot, serene derivatives, 3 KIA, 1 survivor. Nothing about farmers from outside dimensional space. Nothing about humans being crops. Nothing about the harvest that was coming for all of us. Night fell. and with it came a different visitor. Colonel Stevenson returned, but not alone. She brought a woman in civilian clothes, Asian features, maybe mid-30s, carrying a medical bag. "This is Dr. Maya Chen," Stevenson said, and I noticed she carefully didn't mention any relation to the intelligence officer with the same surname. "She'll be handling your psychiatric evaluation." Dr. Chen had intelligent eyes that seemed to see too much. She pulled up a chair, movements careful and deliberate. "Captain Harper, I specialize in trauma recovery for soldiers who've experienced unusual events." She glanced at Stevenson. "Could we have privacy?" Stevenson hesitated, then left. Dr. Chen waited until the door clicked shut. "The restraints must be uncomfortable. May I?" She didn't wait for permission, just started undoing the straps. "There, better?" I rubbed my wrists, studying her. "You don't believe the chemical weapons story." "What I believe isn't relevant. What matters is helping you process what happened." She pulled out a notebook, old-fashioned paper, not a tablet. "Tell me what you remember. All of it." So I did. Every impossible detail. The purple sky, the creatures, the way time moved wrong. Dolly in the wall, the crack between dimensions. She took notes without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification but never challenging what I said. When I finished, she set down her pen. 12 other incidents in the past 5 years, different locations, same pattern. Survivors who tell impossible stories, then either accept the official narrative or disappear into psychiatric facilities. "You believe me? I believe you experienced something that doesn't fit our understanding of reality." She leaned forward. "The question is what you do with that experience." Before I could respond, Stevenson returned. The sun had set completely, and the hospital room felt smaller in the darkness. "Time's up," she said to Dr. Chen, then to me. "There's a ceremony tomorrow. Purple Hearts for the whole squad. The families will be there." The families. Zoe's grandmother, Catherine's sister, Dolly's parents and siblings. All of them expecting answers, deserving truth they'd never get. "I can't, you can, and you will." Stevenson's tone brooked no argument. "You owe them that much." She was right. I owed them the only closure they'd ever receive, even if it was built on lies. The ceremony was held in a small chapel on base. I stood in dress uniform while they pinned a purple heart to my chest, the metal cold even through my shirt. They praised my courage in surviving a chemical attack, called me a hero for trying to save my squad despite the toxic exposure. 3 flag-draped coffins sat before the altar. Empty, I was certain, or filled with something that wasn't really them. But the families didn't know that. They cried and held each other while a chaplain spoke about sacrifice and duty. Zoe's grandmother, tiny and fierce even in her grief, grabbed my hands afterward. "She wrote about you, said you were the best commander she ever served under." I wanted to tell her the truth, that Zoe had been brave until the end, walking into that red light with her head high. That she might still exist somewhere, broken down into components I didn't understand, stored in facilities outside our dimension. Instead, I said, she was the best soldier I ever served with. Catherine's sister showed me a photo from their childhood, 2 girls grinning at the beach. She was supposed to come home next month. We were going to take Mom to the coast. Dolly's mother didn't speak English, but her father translated her words. Was it quick? Did she suffer? No, I lied. It was quick. They handed folded flags to the families, played taps, gave 21 gun salutes that echoed across the base. And through it all, I stood silent, the truth burning in my throat like acid. That night, alone in temporary base housing, I finally looked in the bathroom mirror. My hair had grown back completely white, stark against my olive skin. The face staring back looked older, haunted, but it was the eyes that made me step back. In the right light, at the right angle, I could swear I saw purple reflected in them. I held up my hands, studying the black fingernails, scraped one with my pocket knife, but the color went deeper than keratin, deeper than flesh, like I'd been marked, tagged, changed. I counted my reflections in the mirror, one in the center, clear and present, but in my peripheral vision I caught glimpses of others. 2, 3, 4. Versions of myself at slightly different angles, in slightly different positions. Too many faces staring back. The official story would hold. I'd go home, start therapy with Dr. Chen, try to build something resembling a life. But I knew the truth now. We were crops in a farm that spanned dimensions. The harvest was real, and it would come again. Somewhere out there, more villages would empty. More soldiers would walk into red light. More families would receive folded flags and wonder why their loved ones' coffins had to stay closed. And somewhere in a purple dimension that existed parallel to ours, Dolly was still in that wall, spelling out warnings with hands that shouldn't exist. The farmers were still working their fields. The harvest would continue, but I'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, I'd survived. Now I had to figure out what to do with that survival, because knowing the truth and being unable to tell it, that might be worse than dying in the purple light with my squad. I touched the mirror, and for just a moment, all 4 reflections moved independently. Tomorrow, I'd go home, accept the lie, start therapy. Tonight, I stood in a military bathroom, counting my reflections and wondering which one was really me. The warehouse stretched out in front of me like a concrete tomb, 40,000 square feet of nothing but shadows and industrial shelving, perfect for someone who couldn't sleep anymore. "Night shift's quiet," the day security guard said, handing over the keys. "Just walk the perimeter every 2 hours, check the loading docks. Easy money." Easy. Right. Nothing was easy when every emergency exit sign looked like the beginning of the end. I took the keys anyway, needing the job more than I needed to avoid red lights. The VA disability check didn't cover rent in Denver, and explaining gaps in employment was harder than pretending to be functional for 8 hours. The first week went fine. I developed a routine, patrol routes that avoided the exit signs, keeping my eyes down when I passed the fire alarm strobes. The warehouse stored medical supplies, boxes of gauze and syringes that would never see a purple sky. During the long hours between rounds, I researched on my phone, careful to use VPNs and temporary email addresses. Missing persons reports had patterns if you knew how to look. Whole families vanishing from rural areas, leaving meals half-eaten, livestock found in fields, arranged in geometric patterns. Aurora borealis appearing at latitudes where it shouldn't exist. The news called them different things: cult suicides, gas leaks, mass hysteria. But the pattern was there. Every 17 to 23 years in the same regions, like clockwork, like a harvest schedule. My therapist's office smelled like vanilla candles and lies. Dr. Maya Chen sat across from me, pen poised over her notepad, wearing the kind of patient expression they must teach in psychiatry school. "How are the nightmares, Sophia?" "Better," I lied, though we both knew I hadn't slept more than 3 hours straight since Romania. "The medication helps." She made a note. Dr. Chen always made notes, but her eyes said something different than her pen. She'd lean forward when I recited the official story, watching my face like she was looking for cracks in a mask. "Tell me again about the chemical exposure," she said, though we'd covered this in every session for 2 months. "Soviet-era depot, hallucinogenic agents, 3 days of lost time." The words came out mechanical, rehearsed. "My squad died from exposure. I survived but experienced significant psychological trauma." "And the physical changes?" She gestured at my hair, white as fresh snow under the office fluorescence. "Extreme stress response. The doctors at Walter Reed said it's rare, but documented." Another note. "And the cellular mutations?" My fingers tightened on the chair arms. The official medical report mentioned anomalous cellular changes consistent with exposure to unknown radiation, but nobody wanted to explain what kind of radiation turned fingernails black or made someone's DNA look like it had been partially rewritten. They said it would stabilize, I offered. Has it? No. If anything, it was getting worse. I could see things in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned. Sometimes my reflection moved a half-second late. Once, I'd reached for a coffee mug and my hand had passed through it before solidifying. But admitting any of that meant hospitalization. It's stabilized, I said. Dr. Chen set down her pen, leaning back in her chair. Sophia, I've been treating veterans for 15 years. PTSD, combat stress, traumatic brain injuries. But your case... She paused, choosing words carefully. Your symptoms don't match typical chemical exposure. The cellular changes, the specific nature of your trauma responses, even the way you describe your hallucinations. They're too consistent, too detailed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I don't understand. I think you do. She pulled out a different file, older, worn at the edges. I had a patient 8 years ago, Marine unit, classified operation in Alaska. Came back with white hair, black fingernails, and a story about lights in the sky that nobody believed. The official report said ergot, poisoning from contaminated MREs. She slid a photo across the desk. A young Marine, maybe 25, with the same white hair, the same empty eyes I saw in my mirror every morning. He killed himself 6 months later, she said quietly. Left a note saying they were coming for him, that he could feel them getting closer. My mouth went dry. Why are you showing me this? Because I've had 4 similar cases over my career. Different units, different locations, but always the same physical changes. Always the same official cover story. She leaned forward. And all of them are dead except you. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. I can't help you if you keep lying to me, she continued. But more importantly, I think you need to find others who've survived whatever really happened. The isolation is what killed my other patients, the feeling that they were alone with an impossible truth. She wrote something on a prescription pad, but it wasn't medication. An email address and a phrase, "The sky was wrong." Send that exact phrase to this address, she said. Someone will respond. That night at the warehouse, I set up my laptop in the security office and created another anonymous email account. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. This felt like crossing a line, admitting that the official story was bullshit, that I'd never really left that purple world behind. I typed, "The sky was wrong." The response came in 12 minutes. "It was purple where you were, red when they came. You're not alone. We remember too." Attached was a link to an encrypted forum. I clicked through, finding dozens of posts. Survivors from around the world sharing fragments of impossible experiences. A French soldier who'd lost his unit in Mali. A Japanese researcher from an Antarctic station. A Brazilian cop who'd investigated a missing village in the Amazon. All describing the same things. Red lights, purple skies, creatures that shouldn't exist, and bodies that came back wrong. I started documenting everything, cross-referencing their accounts with missing persons databases. The patterns became clearer. The incidents weren't random. They followed ley lines, occurred during specific astronomical alignments, clustered around areas with high electromagnetic activity. Someone had mapped them, predicting future event windows. 3 weeks into my research, a different kind of message arrived. "You found Morrison's dog tag. I served with him. 1953, Korea. We need to talk." The message included a photo, an old Polaroid of soldiers in Korean War-era uniforms. One face was circled, young, maybe 19, with the kind of smile that hadn't seen horror yet. The metadata showed the photo had been taken 2 months ago. The same face, barely aged, stared back at me. Terry Russell lived, if you could call it that, in a trailer park outside Billings. I drove 14 hours straight, downing gas station coffee and watching my mirrors for things that shouldn't be there. Twice, I saw shapes pacing my car from the tree line, keeping perfect speed at 70 miles per hour. When I stopped for gas in Wyoming, the bathroom mirror showed 4 of me again. 1 still normal, 3 in various stages of becoming something else. The diner where we'd agreed to meet looked like it had been serving the same coffee since the 50s. Terry sat in the back corner, wearing an old Army field jacket with the patches removed. Even from across the room, I could see what we had in common. White hair, 1,000-yard stare, fingers drumming nervously on the table. Up close, he looked maybe 70, though if he'd served in Korea, he should be over 90. The dimensional exposure, he said without preamble, noting my assessment. It changes how we age, or don't age. Still figuring that out after 70 years. He held up his hand. Black fingernails, just like mine. Coffee? Sure. The waitress poured without looking at us like we were furniture. Terry waited until she was back behind the counter. Morrison was a good kid, wrote to his girl every day, carried her picture in his helmet. He stared into his coffee. When the lights came, he walked right into them, didn't even hesitate. None of them did, except me. I hid like a coward while my unit dissolved. It's not cowardice to survive. That's what I tell myself. He pulled out a worn notebook, pages yellowed with age. Been tracking incidents since '53. The patterns, the frequency, the escalation. He showed me hand-drawn charts, newspaper clippings, photos spanning decades. Villages in Siberia, fishing towns in Alaska, settlements across South America, Africa, Asia. Always the same. Lights in the sky, mass disappearances, a few survivors who came back wrong. It's accelerating, he said. Used to be every 20 years in a region, then 15. Now? He showed me a map with red pins. 3 incidents in the last 18 months. The harvest, I said, remembering the visions Dolly's transformation had shown me. His eyes sharpened. You saw it, the full picture. Earth after earth being farmed. We're just one crop among thousands. Millions, he corrected. Maybe billions. I've had 70 years to piece together fragments from other survivors. The things that take us, they exist outside our dimensional framework. To them, we're like, imagine if corn could think. Would it understand the farmer, the concept of harvest seasons? So we're just supposed to accept it, let them take us? No. He leaned forward, voice dropping. That's why we're building a network. Survivors who remember, scientists who believe, military personnel who've seen too much to buy the cover stories. There's a gathering next week in Wyoming, remote location, off the grid. He slid a piece of paper across the table, GPS coordinates and a date. How many? 43 confirmed survivors. Another 100 supporters. Family members, researchers, people who've lost someone to the lights. He finished his coffee. We're trying to understand the pattern, predict the next harvest sites, maybe find a way to fight back, though I don't know how you fight something that exists in more dimensions than we can perceive. I memorized the coordinates, then watched him burn the paper in the ashtray. They know about us, he said quietly. The ones who survived. We carry residue from their dimension. It marks us, makes us visible to them. You've seen them, haven't you? Watching your apartment? My blood chilled. Shadows that move wrong, figures in windows that vanish when I look. They're scouts, checking if we're worth retrieving, if we know too much, if we're spreading the truth. He stood, tossing money on the table. Be careful. The more we gather, the more we draw their attention. But alone, he shrugged, alone we just go crazy and die. That night, back in Denver, I found them waiting. 3 figures stood in my apartment parking lot, perfectly still under the streetlight. wrong proportions. Too tall, arms too long, heads that didn't quite sit right on their necks. When I blinked, they were closer, having covered 20 feet without moving. I sat in my car, engine running, watching them watch me. Other residents walked past like they weren't there. A dog being walked started barking frantically, pulling away, but its owner just yanked the leash and kept going. Only I could see them. Me and probably the dog. They stood there for 3 hours, not moving except for those impossible jumps closer when I blinked. Finally, as dawn approached, they simply weren't there anymore. No departure, no fading, 1 second present, the next gone. I went inside and packed everything I owned into 2 bags. My laptop with all the research, the few clothes that still fit my changing body, Morrison's dog tag, and the journal I'd started keeping, documenting everything I remembered from the purple world. The gathering was 5 days away. I'd spend them on the road, moving, making myself harder to track. I'd find the others like me, compare notes, maybe find answers. Or maybe we'd all just go crazy together, a bunch of broken soldiers and civilians trying to make sense of a universe that saw us as nothing more than crops to be harvested. Either way, I was done pretending to be normal. Done lying to therapists and jumping at red lights and waiting for those things to come for me in the night. If we were being farmed, if Earth was just another field in their infinite harvest, then maybe it was time to be more than wheat waiting for the scythe. Maybe it was time to be weeds, harder to kill, impossible to fully remove, spreading truth like seeds on the wind. The highway stretched out before me, leading to Wyoming and whatever answers 43 survivors might have. In my rearview mirror, Denver fell away, but I knew the shadows would follow. They always did now. But I was done running from them. It was time to run toward something instead, toward others who knew the sky could turn purple, who'd seen their friends dissolve into light, who carried the mark of dimensions humans weren't meant to survive. Time to find my tribe among the damaged and displaced, the ones who'd looked into the face of our farmers and lived to remember it.